Okay. What do I do, right here?
Yes.
Any shape? Okay.
And then also here we have Dave Skornia, who is the owner of this farm here. And I think real quick, Dave, you just want to give us an introduction and a little background on your farm here and what all we got going on.
Welcome, everyone. Probably one of our more challenging years here. We thought last couple of years so dry, do anything for some rain, and kind of rethinking that whole program this last year. Anybody that's trying to do dry hay this year, it is stressful for sure. We've been here since, as you can see on the barn, 1881, although none of this was here back then. So we've been on this little corner here for a few years anyways. And we primarily market horse hay, square bales, round bales, and then we direct market dry aged beef to a couple local stores, restaurants. Oh, sorry. Is that better? Yeah, I can hear myself now. So anyways, direct market beef and raise the crops for that. And have done cover crops for many years, but what really changed this farm is when I attended a small farm conference probably 15 years ago, and Gary Zimmer was the keynote speaker there, and BioAg had a table there, and holy smokes, what a difference on our light sandy soil. Not only using their not just the products, but the just the whole idea with cover crops, the liquid carbon, molasses, different things, and just a tremendous difference not only in the yield but the quality of what we were growing, and so worked with them ever since, along with Ellsworth. So just wanted to share that with everyone, that if they can make use of that. Gary's got a great program if you've never heard him before. And we thought Gary will talk here a little bit, and then we'll go up the road, see some different cover crops that we tried, and look at that, dig up some roots, and come back here. There'll be lunch, and look at some equipment, and we'll do a few demonstrations here, and go from there. Anything else?
Thanks, Dave. Lastly, and I will introduce our keynote speaker, Gary Zimmer, who's the founder of Midwestern BioAg. Turn the mic over.
All right. Thank you. Yes, I see some people around the corner. How many people have heard me speak before? Do you? Whole new crowd. How many people have read my books? A few of you. So anyway, there's books on the table there. Midwestern BioAg has here, and I've written several books. I'm a dairy nutritionist. Just one more question. How many people milk cows? No? Oh, I found one. Definitely a dying breed, aren't they? The dairy farms are gone with the guy. How many people make a living with 200 chickens? Oh, it's the same way. They make a kind of farm kind of thing. So I'm a dairy nutritionist who got into soils to create better quality feed for dairy cows. I'm self-taught in soils. Everybody thinks I'm a soils guy, but cows and soils are very similar. They're biological systems. They both do digestion. They both break down things, and there's a lot of things that are kind of in common. So I was teaching at a tech college in Minnesota and got introduced to Brookside Laboratory Farms and soils. And so I had the students that I had at that time. This is way back in the 70s. I've been at this for over 40 years, closer to 50 years. I know a lot of you weren't born yet. And so what you're talking about today isn't new. Everybody thinks it's new. We got better with the equipment. We got better and smarter at what we were doing. But I had the students do projects on their farm. And one of the students put on some calcium and some sulfur and some trace minerals, and the feed test changed. I said, oh my gosh, I spent 9 years at the university. Nobody ever told me I could change the feed. So I said, well, what would ideal feed for a dairy cow look like? And so we came up with all kinds of putting on our calciums and our trace minerals and changing the feed a cow takes. See, if you look at an animal, how much they eat, your biggest impact is on changing the volume of the food, and that's the forages. I told the dairy farmers, give me your dry cows and give me your forages, and I'll change your farm. I had to get that cow ready to go into the next lactation, and we had to get the forages changed. And we had to grow special feed for dry cows and everything else. Well, I left teaching and I joined Brookside, and then we started Midwestern BioAg because I couldn't get any of the products I wanted. I wanted to put on some calcium. I wanted to use some rock phosphate. I wanted to use potassium sulfate instead of potassium chloride. I wanted to use a balance of fertilities. I wanted trace minerals. Well, I want to tell you, 40 years ago, they did not exist. You could not buy ammonium sulfate. You could not buy MAP. You couldn't buy anything. And so that's how we got into the fertilizer business, and that was a long, long time ago. Pete's been with us since the 90s, early 90s, BioAg, Michigan. They met those guys at the Dairy Expo, and Mike Cox and him came over. That's how we got started in Michigan. But a lot in the beginning we had all our small family dairy farms. And so, see, a dairy farmer, when they do this, they get paid twice. Just like you do with your garden, you get paid twice. Once the fun of growing it and the exercise, the other thing to eat it. You get the benefits of eating it. Well, our dairy farms, see, they got the rewards of growing a healthy, wonderful crop, but then they got the feed to the livestock and got a second benefit. See, if you're just going to sell the hay, you don't necessarily get that benefit kind of a thing. So we're actually in about 6 or 7 different states. The reason I had to travel that far to find anybody that would even listen to me. Well, 50 years ago, this was not a hot topic. I never in my wildest imagination dreamt that all of a sudden it can't even get an argument anymore. In the old days, everybody was attacking me, and I got myself well educated, and I talk fairly fast, and so I keep everybody get a word in edgewise, so that's why I travel the countryside with that all. So anyway, I think he said I met the small farm conference. I met Dave. I did trainings in my farm. My family lives in southwestern Wisconsin, and we had a research farm. I did field days for 25 years on my farm. The third Tuesday of August for 25 years, it has never rained in Spring Green, Wisconsin. I quit the field days about 5 years ago. We got up to over 1,000 people. We fed them all. Oh God, it was chaos. It's nice. We started out with a crowd like this, but when we got up over 1,000, I decided it was just overwhelming. In the beginning, we had the farm set up where we would demonstrate calcium. We'd do all these demonstrations. Eventually, the whole farm changed. We're now all certified organic. We fix soils. We just transitioned another 100 acres last year from conventional into organic, and we spend 2 years, 36 months since your last prohibited substance, you'll be certified organic. And in those 2 years, we do nothing but build soils. We spent $1,000 an acre regenerating the land before it's certified organic. Now everybody's, oh my gosh, yes, we got $100,000 in the project, and this year it's underwater. Our first year organic crop. So welcome to farming. How many people farm organically? A few of you. I know Pete and those guys do. And I'm not saying we can feed the world. I said the words sand and organic are not in the same sentence, Dave. And so we had those discussions. We grow cover crops. We have 1 year soil building and 1 year corn. I learned that from vegetable farms. I got involved with some in Virginia. If you're going to have a 10-acre vegetable farm, you need to have 20 acres of land, 10 getting ready to farm and 10 farming. You grow your cover crops, you get your minerals just like we do. So we spend on our organic farm, we sell corn. We grow a lot of rye. We farm about 1,500 acres, and my son farms alone, and we farm in a 45-mile circle on 1,500 acres. Now, we got a little help truck driving and a little help tractor driving in the spring. Otherwise, he's all alone. And so, but we have 1 year soil building, so we plant rye after corn, then we frost seed clover. Now we combine the rye. I got to head out tomorrow. We're starting to combine rye right now, and then we'll just clip it down, and next spring we'll clip it in August, and then we'll put on a ton of compost per acre. Next spring, when the clover gets this high, we turn it down and plant corn. So that's our corn market is to a local organic poultry operation, and we get all their manure back. So we're 100% organic, including the manure that goes on our farm, which a lot of people, the rule I was involved a long time with writing some of those rules. So every farm's got a unique situation, just like this one here. See, what's also happening in agriculture, which is kind of interesting, I spent 9 years at the university, so I have a right to say things, you see. I know how it operates. I went to school in Hawaii, which is really crazy, but they paid the most money when I got into graduate school. So anyway, Hawaii was a nice place to go. I said, I've been married for 56 years. We got married, and I took her to 3 years of honeymoon in Hawaii while we went to school. So now that's why our marriage survived. You see how that works? Just giving you advice on how to keep your marriage alive. But, and so all those years, the universities were very critical all this time out here. And I said to our university in Wisconsin, they got black prairie soils, and they got a dairy farm on the end, and they do all their research. And I stand up and say, if you have a black prairie soil like this, and a dairy farm on the end with all that manure, and you have no limited budget, whatever the research is showing you helps you. Well, how many got a farm like that? Now, you go to Dave's farm, how many guys are selling hay and doing his rotation and cover crops and things, not that can't be duplicated. Shocking here, our farm, we ran a real tight rotation. 2 years hay and then it would turn into corn. He did his hay and that gets as old as me before he takes it down. 10 years, his crops look really good. 15 years?
Gotta get 30 cuttings off.
You see, the reason why he doesn't need to be fertilized, you know how deep that alfalfa root is after 15 years? It's halfway to China. Sucking up all those minerals from down that are tied up down in the soil. So every farm is different and they're a whole different story. So what's happening in agriculture, university research, I tell people, if you're going to follow university research, you better make sure that research farm is doing exactly the same thing you're doing. Otherwise, how does that help you? Today with technology, Midwestern BioAg has 250 plots going on farms. All these farmers got GPS and we got field analytics, and they take images of the crop growing and measure photosynthesis, and it's unbelievable. So every farm becomes its own research station. And then they can test out, everybody's selling a biological. What makes you think adding more bugs is your problem? You see, and so everybody's got a farm that's got limiting factors, and so what fits your farm? Our farm, years ago, the first change, and everybody used to just farm. And then sustainable ag came along, and then organic came along later on, but sustainable ag was the first movement in agriculture. And why didn't it survive? Because you can't sustain a mess and survive. Now the word regenerative is the hot topic. Well, at least everybody's admitting that needs to make some regeneration. We need to fix it. So I said, regenerate your land and then become sustainable. That's our farm. We're a very low input farm. We buy sulfur and boron. We make compost. We bring on manure. But we spend, like I said, $1,000 an acre fixing the land, and then we sustain it. But see, everybody's not in a position to want to do that. In this light sandy soil, you can't do that because you don't have enough reserve of nutrients like we do out on our land. And I like to take over land from the farmer that went broke buying too much fertilizer. Oh, I do not want to take a farm that's been in hay for 20 years or CRP land and it won't even grow a good weed anymore and start from there. That is not the same spot that I want to start with. That might work for you.
That's the challenge, though.
That's the challenge.
That gives you the before and after pictures.
That's right. And you got some, we toured the farm. I went and saw a lot of things out here yesterday. It's pretty impressive to see what's taking place on this. I'm looking at one picture in one day in time. So the message I really want to give is that knowledge is powerful. The agriculture is changing. We can't be totally dependent upon chemistry. I was telling some of the people over here, my books get me all over the planet. And actually, my book is in Polish. If you speak Polish, now you can have a book that's in Polish. It's in Spanish. I just did a conference in Mexico, in southern Mexico, with avocados. What do I know about avocados? They taste pretty good. 250,000 acres of avocados in southern Mexico. What's their interest? Well, they got to clean up their act. See, there's pressure being put on by the food companies. 2 weeks ago, we had 24 agronomists and farm managers come from Denmark. Denmark is a 225,000 acre farm, and they farm in 9 countries. And the owner is a single family in Denmark, said we are going to farm more regeneratively. We're going to get rid of all those toxic chemicals we've been using. We're going to regenerate that land, and we're going to, also with that, we're going to sequester carbons. And the food companies are the ones that are putting pressure. They're not going to put pressure on your garden. They're going after the 200,000 acre farms. And so I get involved with them. And so it's not that I'm in favor of a 200,000 acre farm, but it is nice to work with a farm where there's no budget. They're extremely wealthy. The pistachios in California, they went out to California, they took pistachios, they grew a cover crop, clover on amongst the pistachios. Once the clover's right, now what do you do? So the owner of the outfit, they brought in 5,000 head of sheep. And then they went to Peru and they brought in a whole bunch of sheep herders to live with the sheep. Now, how many are in a position to do that? Anyway, changes will take place, and I love to see it. The consumers got to get behind it. More people got to get sick. It's got to get worse before it can get better, I keep telling people. And that's kind of sad to say. And I think we're heading down some of those paths in food and nutrition and junk food and all those other kind of things. I do challenge most people on energy. I'm going to turn 80 years old this year. It's on my mind. It's never been on my mind before. I've just been around a long time. How old would I be if I didn't know how old I was? I would never write 80 on that paper. My gosh. I might write 60, though. So anyway, I think you start out with knowledge. There's some books there that we got at BioAg booth. You can find specials on books today. They're $20. You can have a book and you can read your books and do those kind of things. I think we're going to see a farm for what it is. We'll get on these wagons here shortly and go out and take a look at the cover crops and some things they're doing. So I think it's really simple. I wrote the rules to biological farming years ago. There are no really sustainable rules to regenerative farming. Regenerative says you have to have livestock. If you think this country is going to put livestock back in every acre, you're absolutely wrong. Now, we might be able to we make fertilizers on the back of an anaerobic digester and some of those things. We've got all these big mega farms. And so my biological farming rules, you got three things to deal with. You got minerals, chemistry. You got the physical properties in the soil. In other words, right now, as much as the rain and hard and packed, I like to run aeration and make sure we got air. You got to control air and water. And so we got the chemical, the physical, and then the biological. And it took me a long time to learn that the plants determine who lives in your soils. That's why the diversity, these cocktail mixes and plants. Now, us organic guys have a huge advantage. We don't need to buy cocktail mixes. We have weeds. And they're also diversity plants. And so we can just take and let our weeds grow up. Now, Pete doesn't have weeds. He doesn't farm like I do. So anyway, so I guess we're going to get on the wagons, and you guys can question me as the day goes on. It's a pleasure to be here. And like I said, I've been blessed to be in a field that my wife, last night we had the discussion around the table. My wife's complaint is, I don't know how to play. My passion is farming. If we had milk cows all those years, when in the world would I learn how to play? So if I quit farming, I'm like every other old farmer, you die. So I keep farming and keep traveling around and enjoy it. So I enjoy your day. Nice to see so many of you show up. And so I guess we'll take the wagons from here. So this one right here, he said was sun hemp. Now, sun hemp is the biggest nitrogen producer of anything you can plant. I guess is sun hemp. But obviously, we mix it with sorghum sudan grass. It competes really well. But this one's got a little shaded down in there, whatever reason is on the soil. Maybe it needs something. But sun hemp is another one of those wonderful cover crop plants.
And so when do tillage in the spring, just minimal tillage, flat corn, that rye is probably knee high. So all that green manure is going back in, and along with a ton and a half of Morgan's layer ash blend. And so anyways, had always done rye and oats, things like that as cover crops, but through Ellsworth got exposed to the multi-species. Wow, what a difference. You start getting the diversity in the cover crops. And Gary will talk more about the biology, beneath the soil. And so the more diversity above the ground, the more diversity below the ground. And so here, there are some mixes, but we're kind of just showing some different things, or me trying to find out what works. So we can walk through it. Feel free to walk anywhere. Don't worry about hurting anything. We're going to probably mow this down at some point, and probably, and then a lot of it, like buckwheat, will grow back up, mow it down again, and then it'll get rye broadcast for the winter cover crop.
All right, good. Now, obviously, these are brassicas in here, and I believe they're antimycorrhizal. Is that true? Anybody can argue with me anytime. I'm good with that. Is that true, John? Sure. Sure. Well, that's why mustard and things, they're biofumigant, some of these things, and antimycorrhizal. But if this land was 100% generated, it would all look like this, wouldn't it? But you realize what this farm does? 75 cuttings of hay came off this land, and it was all run down in poor fertility when he started. You realize you don't do that by just sticking seeds in the ground. You better have a program of putting on minerals and nutrition, and right, I don't know if this is economically feasible. Now, if you were a gardener, you could do this on the whole field. Morgan would love it. You always look at, it doesn't really matter. I think the diversity out here took me a long, long time to learn this, that the plants determine the biology. It's not the other way around. And that's why corn beans is a failing farming system. You don't have enough diversity unless you're really lousy at weed control. Or the herbicide-resistant weeds right now are probably going to give you the diversity you didn't really want. But that's why, how do you do corn and beans this far north if you had them out here and grow a cover crop? You can put rye as the only one. I'm with a group called Rye Revival. Rye is a plant that's here to save the planet, but everybody doesn't know it. What else are you going to plant in November? What else are you going to plant on January 1? and have it grow that next year, and it's called rye. See, I would saw a three-way farming system for a lot of people, corn, beans, and wheat, but there's no markets in a lot of places, and then your land is expensive, and nobody wants to kind of do that, so we have to come up with systems. But if I don't have the diversity of the cover crop, I can at least put out carbon-based minerals, compost, I can do different things. So anyway, each plant does a different thing out here, and that's why the cocktail mixes, I think, make a lot of sense, because first of all, when they're all planted, a lot of them thick together, they'll grow taller because they're very competitive. See, in Europe, your grain drills have singulated seeds now. They don't just roll out a little tube down the tube. We seed all our rye with an air machine, so it's all spread out, they're not in rows. Because we plant our rye after corn harvest, and in the spring we frost seed a clover blend in there, three-way clover. And see, contrary to what he does, we're trying to get some deep roots to grow. You take a 10, 15-year-old alfalfa stand, those roots are really down in there bringing up minerals. You don't realize that they're, and so, but most crop corn and beans, they aren't bringing anything deep. They're shallow-rooted plants. Our 2-year-old hay stand that we turned down doesn't have near the root kind of a mass to bring up kind of minerals, but each one of these plants bring up different minerals. Buckwheat back here is, first of all, the most fastest aggressive growing cover crop you can find. It does not tolerate much frost. It's a 60-day crop, and it's, oats and buckwheat have something in common. They both have the most acidic root of any plant. Why do you think your grandparents planted oats? Because it could grow without fertility, because the acidity of the root took out more minerals out of the soil. So both buckwheat and oats are very given credit for bringing up phosphorus levels. Because the roots are so acidic that they solubilize those nutrients in the soil, and now, once that phosphorus is in that plant, it's in a what I call the carbon biological cycle. See, we like to we manufacture fertilizer on the back of an anaerobic digester, so we got the feed that's in the cow for 24 hours, and it's in the digester for 3 weeks, and the methane is made, so what comes out of it is a bunch of dead bodies of bugs, and then we add the minerals to that, so we got a biological, and we got a buffer. In nature, we're trying to assimilate. In nature, there's no, well, the thunder might have given you 10 pounds of nitrogen, but that's about it, but nutrients don't fall out of the back of a buggy across. In nature, they come from plants. So that plant now is higher in phosphorus, higher in magnesium. And that got that acidic root. So when that breaks down, I now have that the carbon biological cycle. And that's where your minerals belong. And that's what we try to mimic when we manufacture fertilizer. The same with the Morgan compost and the stuff they take in animal manures and adding things to it and ash to it. What's else there? There's ash added to it and gypsum.
Oh, on the compost, yeah.
Or no, on the Morgan stuff.
On the Morgan? Yeah, ash and gypsum.
Ash and gypsum are added to
the layer ash blend with ash and gypsum.
Yep. And that's why people don't realize this. You guys got battles as farmers. What's the number one yield limiting factor on 75% of the farms I ever stood up? Phosphorus. And everybody's attacking phosphorus. I'm the guy that's, I got battles. Pete knows me well. I'm in battles all the time. I'm the guy that stands up and say, to force a person to go no-till and dump all your manure and everything on top of the ground, and then it rains, it washes down in the ocean. Erosion is why phosphorus got into the water. It didn't leach. It's a triple negative charge. It's really held tight. Our digestate fertilizer, our biggest customers are in North Dakota. We doubled yields on crops in North Dakota. You want to talk about feeding the world? Because they can't get phosphorus up there because their pHs are 8 and no mycorrhiza can live at an 8 pH. These are antimycorrhizal here, but they're not the whole system. You're going to have a different kind of a system. So phosphorus uptake is huge. So now you got buckwheat, you got oats, and you let those things go back into the soil, and now that phosphorus is in a plant usable form. You can take commercial phosphorus and spread it out there, and you got about 2 weeks, and it's tied up. You know, we're real believers in balancing soluble to slow release. We want to use fertilizers that are all salty, and that means we want some commercial soluble, then we also want to use things like rock phosphate manures that are more slow released in the fertilizer world. And we want to have a balance of all those minerals, so we paid a lot of attention to how things get delivered to plants. But everybody doesn't see almost that crop's a 60-day crop. A few years ago, I told them, you work that down, so that's an indeterminate plant. In other words, there's seeds in those heads right today. So if you want to wait to harvest that, you either got to swath it or plant it late and wait till it freezes, then you can combine the standing. If you work that down right now, you're going to get a second crop of buckwheat that is thick as hair in the dog because that's got all those seeds in it. We would turn that down and you get another crop, and it dies the first sign that the weather man says it's going to freeze, it dies. It's coming. Buckwheats are not tolerating any frost, whereas oats is a little different. So these got different things. Yeah. The
field across the road is probably 30 some years ago. First time I planted buckwheat, July 20th. What's today? The 18th. It froze.
Oh, frozen July 20th?
Yeah. Just
Where am I?
on the side of the hill. So anything can happen.
Yeah,
But it came out.
came out of it. So I was buying a couple years ago. I volunteered in the spring. It was solid buckwheat. I had an old farmer neighbor of mine, and he came by, and I had corn planted in there, and it looked like a buckwheat field with some corn in rows. And he said, "What are you going to do with that weed mess?" I said, "Oh," I said, "I can cultivate between the rows." I said, "Buckwheat's a 60-day crop." Well, buckwheat really suppresses a lot of weeds, and so next thing you know, I got this buckwheat killed between the rows, and it was in the row. Well, all of a sudden, we came to harvest corn. There's not a weed in the field. All the buckwheat fell flat on the ground. Now, we had a seed bank for a while. I'd rather have buckwheat seeds. I can manage those suckers than I would giant ragweed. And you guys don't have giant ragweed, but I've got seeds if you need some. He always threatens me. I'm in trouble. If he sees a giant ragweed on his farm, he'll know I have the seeds in my pocket. I didn't even give him a challenge. So Pete's the one that got the bioegg started here, and now he's he's only 60 and he wants to retire. My God.
65 years
Oh. That was 5 years ago.
now.
So anyway, I don't mind. This is kind of a nice demonstration. It'll be interesting to see some of the things that go on. Like next year, how will this perform compared to that? Now, if you got nematodes or you got issues with the soil out here, this will clean it up.
Kind of look at that economically too, where buckwheat, oats, all those are cheap. That's why I like them. But then some of the other seeds, those smaller ones, you might spend a little more on. So you don't want to throw in something like buckwheat that's going to, steal the show from it.
Which is quite amazing now. You started out dry this year. This was planted the end of May, I believe.
May 28th.
May 28th. So and you got rain after that. There was plenty of rain.
You had a pretty good spring though.
You did all the way along. You had enough rain to get this going. You're gonna look down, look at the soil. How many people farm this kind of soil? It's a pretty marginal kind of land we're in here. Obviously, to build that up, and yes, that's why you certainly need more nutrients. Every soil has a certain ability to dish out nutrients. We divide your fertilizer program into two areas: soil correction, what needs to be corrected here, and then crop fertilizer. What do I need to put on like that corn? What I need some extra nitrogen. I might need a little phosphorus for a starter. What do I need? Might need some zinc. So that's the crop fertilizer side of it. And we do some things with molasses and different things to feed that crop. And now we're working with a product called Biogel, which is a gelling agent that holds water and holds nutrients. And so we got trials all over on this Biogel. See, sandy soil, it really fits well. We had really good results in the drought last year. There's Biogel, 1 pound to the acre. Now you're in a seed corn farmer, for 1 pound per acre with a ½ inch of water, which is 13,000 gallons of water, 1 pound of Biogel, and had anywhere between a 4 and 8 bushel yield increase on seed corn. And $100 a bag, they were like, how could that 1 pound and 13,000 gallons of water change this crop that much?
If that corn's a cover crop, how will you handle putting it into the ground?
What's the cover crop? This stuff?
The corn.
Oh, the corn. You see, I think we got to look at a farm that's uniquely different. He said something that my father said, and I cringed a little bit because most people don't see corn as a soil-building crop. First, it's a tropical grass. It doesn't have real complex carbons in it, but he leaves all that stuff out there. He hauls all the hay off. So that's he's got besides cover crops. That's the thing that stays out there the most, and it gets real tall. And so he does put biomass in this sandy soil. Why can't you build organic matter higher in sandy soil? Because there's too much air in the ground. Most of you guys, all your high organic matter soils are down in the bottom where it's too wet. There's not enough air. So that's why it takes roots. And the whole secret to good farming is to get the soil full of roots. See, if I was conventional, we'd be a strip till farmer in our area. The strip till conference is in Madison here, and the Acres USA has new owners now, if you people haven't followed, and they're going to have the conference in Madison next December at Acres, and so I think some positive things are going to happen there. So, yeah. So the other thing is because it's sand, that is an impressive crop of corn plant. Did you have to go a long ways to find it? Oh.
Across the road. Yeah, don't laugh at I could have had a little more nitrogen on the, but I'm probably not the only one that's a little behind this year. So, and yeah, should have had the nitrogen on. I say don't laugh at my corn crop up there. There's a little bit, really needed a little more nitrogen, but yeah, this is an example. Of course, this is going to grow 2 more feet. Yeah. The only thing I'm removing is 1 ear, or sometimes 1.5 ears. Another one comes on, but otherwise all that's getting chopped up, and you barely see it in the spring when the rye's coming up through it, and it makes it easy. The sand is also real easy to till. You know,
Yeah, and I think the other thing about sand is the fact that you have more air and you usually grow some pretty massive root systems. The secret to getting soil, I was in a salt pit last summer and the poor guy was just taking over about corn beans. I literally could not find a living root in the soil. It was like black concrete. It was in Minnesota, heavy black soil. But see, look at all the fine hair roots and look and see, because you got enough air in here. Now that's why, if you get Acres magazine, James White's a professor from out in Rutgers. Anyway, he's saying that this plant is not a vegetarian. It eats bacteria. Those little fine hair roots, that's why if you put salts and things and burn off all those hair roots, it lost its feeding potential. It eats bacteria, absorbs them in, takes the nutrients out of it, and spits the shell back out. So these little plants, so if you're thinking eating a plant, it makes you a vegetarian, but the plant's not a vegetarian. So I don't know. It's kind of crazy, isn't it? But all the little fine hair roots and this root system, you know, obviously there's been enough moisture and things. Of course, it was dug out. Ideally, it is pretty uniform if you look at this now. It's not going sideways, it's going down. And that means there's no obstacles stopping it going down. You probably would if you dug and spent more time. And we like to usually stick these in water and say the dirt soil ought to be sticking to the root. This plant, you don't realize that from 30 to 60% of this photosynthetic sugar that this plant makes goes back into the soil to feed the soil life. And that's why around the roots is the most fertile spot on your farm. And that's why I'm a real believer in strip tilling. I can do shallow incorporating, and then I can take the next plant can follow those same root channels. And that's in the most fertile spot on your farm is a half-inch circle around those root channels. So that's why if you tear everything up and dig it all up and plow it, you lose some of those little channels that you got in your soil. So I'd like this to be wider and bigger and deeper than it maybe is if we just spent more time digging on it. But you can certainly see the bacteria and the exudates in here. On a healthy farm, 50% of what this plant produces goes back in the soil to feed the soil life. Why would this plant give up half of its energy? Because it needs that soil biology to convert the minerals and to give things it wants in trade. Now if your crop is sick, see the future is going to come, we're going to put more focus on photosynthesis. You do not need to add complex carbons. Corn are not complex carbons to build organic matter. You need the liquid carbon. It's like if you want to get a steer fat, do you have to feed it fat or do you feed it corn? You can feed it energy and it gets fat. You take the energy from this plant, put it back in the soil, and the bacteria make their own fats and oils and everything stores something. And some of you store a little more than others, you know. And so we all store things for a bad day. Dave didn't store anything. Oh my goodness, he works too hard. But you see, so the bacteria side, that's the whole thing. We thought for years we had to put complex carbons back in the soil to build organic matter. Now they say it's the liquid carbon. It's the liquid carbon. Jerry Hatfield at Ames, Iowa, he's a researcher from USDA, and he's got several articles out there. Alan Philo used to work for me. He's one of those guys that did. Christine Jones from Australia. It's all about the liquid carbon is how you build organic matter. I got to finish on that organic matter by saying, someone come along and say, no, I raised my organic matter 3% in 2 years. I said, really? What's 3% of 2 million? 60,000 pounds of organic matter. Organic matter is 10% of the carbon that you added. So if you had this cover crop, 10% can turn into organic matter. So in other words, you had 600,000 pounds of crop growing on your field? It's mathematically impossible. If you can get 1% organic matter in 10 years, mathematically that's possible. You're not going to get 2% in 1 year. That's soil sampling errors. Or you're picking up residues that didn't digest down yet. I think you got to use some logic here, but you got to be heading in the right direction. Obviously, these soils have changed. We grow some nice crops on this farm, and these are light soils. This is not an organic farm because it's pretty difficult because you don't have the holding capacity. That's why the guys that grow potatoes on sandy, light soil, see, that's why all of them, they use a lot of phosphorus, and we had to fight really hard in Wisconsin because there's no reserve in these soils. What's the reserve? So, anyway, this is a pretty nice looking crop, pretty nice potential.
Speaking of building organic matter, soil tests, I think we're required every 3 years, and you know, it's got a little bit of report card. You like to see improvement on it, but CECs might creep up a little, but pretty hard. Our organic matters are whopping 1.2% or so. They don't move much, and anyways, I guess the point I want to make is, don't get discouraged by that. But the following year, you can see exactly where that cover crop was the year before. You won't see it on the soil test, but you can sure see it in the following crop. So, whether that's maybe not just organic matter, other things, the right feed for that subsequent crop. But
and that's why testing is testing, and we're really big on taking that soil sample every 3 to 5 years. I got to know where we're working from. When we start out, I want to start with a soil test, but we're not trying to make a perfect looking soil test. We're trying to address limiting factors and excesses. It's really quite simple. Then your crop fertilizer, which you have to do more of on the sand, is another whole category. And this plant right here, there's nothing you can do to this plant to increase yield. The day you open the bag to plant it, its potential is 600 bushel. Everything you do from then on takes it downhill. Think about that. Now, I see a little striping in the leaf. That could be manganese, that could be magnesium, there could be some things out here. How far do you want to go with all that kind of stuff? There's guys that grow their 600 bushel corn. They don't grow it on this soil, by the way. But they do spend a lot of effort and time and a lot of fungicides and pesticides. You got to make sure everything is well protected. It's something that's pretty illogical. But that's why I said you got to look at what's the profitability, what fits my farm, how many got a farm just like this that they can copy this. But this is not, even though it won't change the soil test, boy, this is a huge improvement for this kind of soil. Huge. Otherwise things leach, and now you got nutrients captured and held, and you got a pretty good fertility program right here.
I got a couple questions quick. Would sorghum breed the same thing as the corn? Because sorghum would be a little cheaper to plant. You could probably get a little bit more to it. Won't grow as tall, but would sorghum be the same?
You're talking like a sorghum sedan grass, a sorghum, what was you growing it for? I mean,
Well, like
a green
the sorghum corn.
Sorghum like Milo.
Yeah.
Sorghum green. I think that a lot of people are switching to it in certain areas because the weather patterns are extreme. It really does well in the drought. I was in Australia and everything was brown except the Milo or sorghum, green sorghum fields were still pretty green. So I don't know if it doesn't grow the massive amount of plant that you get out of corn, but it sure can tolerate a lot less moisture. It's why people grow it. It doesn't yield what corn does, but it does all right. And people are starting to feed more of it. It does feed as well as corn does, and so certain areas that might be the best option.
Okay, the other one is do you just disc it down? Because if you don't get it into the ground, it's really not, if you don't get the soil on top of it, corn don't break down very good. So you're not really getting the nutrients out. So how do you guys get you chop it and then put it in, because that would then get it into the ground better, or what's your thoughts on it? How do you guys do it?
We got, our combines got shredder heads in the combines. We shred the stalks best we can, and then we got a big high-speed disc. We shallow incorporate the stalks, but it still looks like a cornfield, and then we put the rye in there. So I got to leave a blanket on top of the ground. I was down in Mexico. It was really cute. It should have been videos. This big old organic farmer in Mexico, big old pot-belly cowboy hat. His English was as good as my Spanish. In other words, we couldn't talk at all. But he took his hat and he threw it on the ground and he said, "Hat, hat, my blanket needs a hat." Everybody got it. Everybody got it. It needs a protection on top of the ground for cooking and baking. That biology doesn't, and that's part of what you're doing here also.
And as far as on the, I do Sudex, there's some Sudex in here, but the farm over on Daggett Road, really sandy hills, and the Sudex worked really well there. That you just got to plant it a little later, following rise, plant it like mid-June or early June. It tolerates frost well, but maybe it's all right, I don't know. But anyways, it got as tall as that corn plant, and it's kind of fun to go through with a tractor and a rotary mower and mow that down probably August, and then it'll come back up probably 3-4 feet, and then mow it down again, might likely incorporate it and then follow that with rye. So,
people have a hard time with that. They have a hard time with the fact we grew all this clover crops and guys last year the drought was short of feed. We had to hide our stuff. Farmers have a terrible habit of leaving anything out. They want to take everything off, including the corn stalks we're betting.
And Paul, as far as the residue, we don't have any of that fun stuff like combines and choppers and high-speed discs. So it's I actually picking corn with a 3-row ear corn picker, and there's usually snow on the ground, and so we come in with a broadcast spreader, spread the rye in the snow, and then follow the 15-foot rotary mower and shred the stalks. And a little bit of snow and it packs it down. but without incorporating it, it's breaking down pretty well, and I think that's what the biology. And then, sometimes if you need something to accelerate that decay on that corn stalk, like the liquid carbon products, the boost, that QOF, we're feeding that biology. Chris can tell you about that more. But then, so this corn would have been used to just disc it once, advantage of sandy soil, but there's quite a bit of volunteer rye pops up, so we might get a second time with a disc, fairly shallow, or a disc with a packer behind it works well. So that answers your question.
You got a field with just basically nothing except knapweed and really sandy soil, a lot worse than this. What's the first thing you do with it?
Well, I start with my soil test and say, what are my major limiting factors? And I think you got to get some biomass growing of some kind. I got to get something going. That's what you started out in a lot of those fields. And then I got to put
a couple years.
It takes several years putting on compost manure. It's hard to put. I can put enough commercial fertilizer on to grow biomass above ground, but I got to start growing something to feed the soil life and more diversity. But we got out there right now, and if that's been a farm that's really run down, it might take quite a bit to get that back. But what does the soil test look like?
I can't see.
Yeah.
So if you put it, would it work to just put in cover crop, or would you need to put some kind of feed on top of it to sort of cover crop would work or would grow actually?
Yes, I'd depend where that soil test is at. I would want to feed that, whether I put on the compost or I put on manure or I put on some fertilizer of some kind to make sure my cover crop is getting some growth in it. And so otherwise it might not do much or grow much if that fertility is that low and that's all you got is greens out you don't like. So you might need to put some nutrients out there, but I'd rather, you're on lighter soil, I assume, to have that. So then I assume the fact that it would be nice to put a carbon base, like compost or manure, if you got those things available. Miles down here, and then he's got leaves and he makes all kinds of things. There's a lot of stuff goes onto this, but he sells a lot of hay. You got to realize what he's exporting on this farm. This is a unique farm. He's done really well with what he had to work with.
What cover crop would you recommend for a real sandy soil like that?
Well, I think the things that I like my cocktail mixes and what stuff's going to toss sandgrass like we talked about. So and I like to. My first choice is always, if it comes fall now, if I got compaction or some kind, I like to grow my dill or radish, but we do oats and peas. I'm a tight old German too. I like to buy the cheapest seed I can. I'm sorry, guys, but we do clovers and we bulk spread clovers, and I want something that is going to, if it's really dry, what's going to tolerate it. And I want plants that are going to be able to extract minerals from that soil, like the oats or buckwheat. So I want a mixture of plants, so they might not all survive. It'll give you an idea of what your land is capable of doing.
My answer to that? On a really sandy ground like that, usually starting out with the rye in the fall, and then, like I said, the Sudex, but especially along with the bean. So that Sudex growing up, might start out, might not get that tight, pull it down, let it rot down. Sudex comes right up through it, pull that down, pull it ride. But the other thing we did on some of the same soil, because before putting it back in corn, really wanting to make sure, or before putting it back into hay, otherwise you can throw the seed out there, it's not going to do anything. But, so things like sweet clover, like a mammoth red clover, Daniel ryegrass, and plant that. Fairly reasonable cost, and just same way, just mow that down for the time of year as it's really necessary. You're not having to chill it. That, you can get a crop that'll go for 2 years. You can get maybe 5 or 6 mows out of it, and let all that ride it down, even though it's not being incorporated, right? It's not.
You can make that work, but a lot of times when someone goes to comment, when you cut something laying on top of the ground, a lot of that's oxidizing up. The roots are there, and a blanket on top of the ground is usually the first step of improving the soil. You just can't leave them bare. No one should be able to see the soil. That's one of the lessons. The other thing is you say, well, I want to grow crop following this and these nitrogen, then I'd mix my sedan grass, the sorghum sedan grass with sun hemp. With sun hemp, those two work together. They both grow really big and tall and aggressive, and I think they both work together quite well. It might be other things. Any more questions?
So what do you have to say about biochar?
Biochar. I'm involved with a very large biochar project. Malaysia, as a country, produces more biochar than any other country. They use palm oil, palm husk, wood. Biochar is by far the best. I'm involved with several products. I don't mind using somebody who's making what's called charcoal or biochar or wood ash or whatever. It's a combination. But biochar is really in a closed chamber without any oxygen. And I think it's got its place. It's a house for the biology. It's totally different than anything else. It's the only thing you'll put on this ground that'll still be here 100 years from now. Biochar is not going anywhere where humates and organic matter, compost, all that stuff is still being digested. Biochar, I don't mind adding it. We like to add 10% of the compost pile, but where are you going to get it and the cost of it right now and all these kind of things out here? Money's tight for a lot of people, and so even my own farm, I can buy biochar for, I can spend $100 an acre to put on biochar. You're sure that's my best use of that $100? So putting it in the compost pile, there's nothing wrong with biochar, but you might not. So then it's like everything else. When you do this, how do you then decide, do I cut my chemical costs now? Do I cut my nitrogen? How do I make this pay for itself? If you're just going to keep doing what you've been doing and do this, you didn't take advantage of this. So I put the biochar there. What am I going to cut? I got sandy soil. He puts the biochar out there. You can still see some of that cornfield. There was a whole bunch of chips on the ground from burning trees and stuff. See, wood, biochar made from wood has got wood vinegar in it. And the wood vinegar is the biological. There's been a lot of research on biochar with no response. It's a house for bacteria, but it's missing the biological, which is the wood vinegar. That's why wood is superior biochar.
And as far as when you talk about the house for it, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think it's a little chunk of biochar has the surface area of a football field. And so that's the amount of area that can hold nutrients, hold water, and that's what I need. The same. There have nutrients out here, particularly if putting the urea on. So I mentioned they would use urea on sandy soil, make sure that you have Christian put that stabilizer in. Leave so much. But anyways, you put the nutrients on, it's got to have a place to hold it. Would it?
And I think biochar fits this kind of soil really well because you have a hard time holding things. So biochar is something that would fit if you could get it and could afford it, and it was a part of your program and your long-term part of your plan.
Well, we feel like walking when we're done flushing it. We kind of walk down and see a compost. So-called
First biochar project I ever saw was in Lismore, Australia, and they put on 10 tons of biochar per acre. It turned a red soil into dark black, and it was unbelievable the change. Biochar was $100 a ton. Land was selling for $800 an acre, and the guy spent $1,000 putting the biochar on. How many farmers are going to buy into that? I said, why don't we start with 100 pounds an acre instead of 10 tons? At least over a period of time, you'll get to that 10 ton was their magical number where they thought they needed to add to a soil to make a huge difference. That was the research about. That was the university.
Is it true that biochar is 99% carbon?
It's highly rich carbon. Everything's been baked out of it. It's baked, it's not burnt. So that's why it's got all those houses in there. Yeah, it's pure carbon. That's why it doesn't break down.
And that's true. That's true. Carbon holds your nutrients.
Yeah, you can certainly do that.
But you need nutrients to hold growth. Huh?
Yeah, you need nutrients to hold. And it's sad to say, if someone paid you for nutrient-dense quality crops, see, what's going to change agriculture? Probably not in my lifetime, but the day they come along with that little thing on your phone, that $200 app, you go to the grocery store, and believe me, there's a lot of money thrown at this project that can measure nutrient density and chemical residues. Can you imagine the grocery stores? If you could go into this one's got way too many pesticides in it, I'm going to go to the neighboring grocery store. You realize you want to change eggs? Now, I said that tool better be right, because everything gets off frequency. Now, it's 700 entries in the computer just to tell the difference between a carrot and a potato. They're a long ways from getting this all developed yet, but still. If I can measure nutrient density, I said to the guys, when you get your equipment, again, used to be one of my consultants that's doing it, when you get this equipment all made, I will go to really good farms and I'll bring you food. If you can't tell the good from the bad, then throw your dumb equipment away. So he's always nervous about me.
I would switch yours. I'd have the nutrient holding capacity and then add the nutrients. I'd do what you can, whether it's biochar or...
So you would add your nutrients to something.
Right, but have something to hold on sand ground, whether it's residue.
Yeah, that's why you put something out here to have a plant growing and suck it up. What's here cannot leach, can't grow, can't get away. And it's time released. Depending on the digestibility of this crop, this gets mature and rank, it's going to break down slower. It might put a drag on your next crop. People always think that corn was a big drag, but it's a tropical grass. There's no complex carbons in it. Very little. So the roots have more than anything else. And of course, they're back in the soil. So this is, if you're going to look at this as a dairy feed, how much milk can you get off of this right today? It might be too mature. That's going to break down slower then. So that's why you got to look at. You got to look at not only the type of plants you're planting, but how mature they are when you put it back in the soil. This whole thing about having to get all this biomass put back in the soil was totally wrong.
So would you, in an ideal situation, rather graze this than mechanically incorporate it?
Would I rather graze this than mechanically incorporate? If I had cattle out here in Wisconsin, I don't think it's a bad option. But you know, a lot of people, I see, our part of the country, we got hills and woods like this, and the minute they got through a fence, the only way I get them back home is to shoot them. Once they're out, they're gone. They're not dairy animals, they're beef animals, so you got dairy here. So I don't think it's a bad idea to graze this, because they're going to eat some. The whole secret to grazing is enough cattle, they waste 2/3 of it. They stomp on it, they pee and they poop. And that's why bison got a better shaped hoof than a cow. They do a better job incorporating residues than cows. Go get some bison.
It's only waste is feed. So they're just doing the incorporating.
Yeah.
Nothing gets wasted.
That's why everybody says out here that the guys who mob grazing all that stuff, they say, oh, we don't want to till. And I said, what do you think the cows are doing? See, the wolves are what built the prairies, not the bison. The wolves herded the bison, and then they all got around, they got nervous, and they stomped, and they beat, and they pooped, and they shallow incorporated residues, and that's what fixed the prairies. I'm a real believer in shallow incorporated residues. That's supposed to rise off up here. I lose a whole bunch of land up here, but I've also got a bunch in the ground. The best goes rocks at the top, the always fix soil from the top down, not the bottom up.
So is this crop feeding, whether I mow it down or lightly tilled, but it's gonna, you know, as it comes back up, this crop here is going to feed that next crop,
It's
right?
going to feed the next crop, and there's a slow release in here, and the poor little bee's going to take some of the sweetness away. There's a honeybee. Isn't it amazing that you can put this out in the middle of nowhere and yet the bees find it? Where do they come from and how do they find it? How does a morel find a dead elm? How does it get there? Yeah, the elms are all dead. Any other questions? You want to walk up there?
We want to walk up there. Just
walk.
around the corner.
Down there, is that one? Where's the biochar pile?
Where's he getting that from, Gary? The biochar.
Makes it.
The other side of the pile.
Well, the other side of the pile, you got to walk around the end and go down the other side. You'll see a big
I think
pile.
he gets all his leaves from the gardener. I think they drop them there.
Yeah, I think they drop leaves from the villages or cities or.
Yeah, and all the private gardeners.
Yeah.
How does he have equipment there to make it, or?
Well, I think he just takes his big skid steer with the pallet forks and picks up through the pile to aerate it.
Exactly.
We watch our piles real close. We want them to get 160 degrees to make sure that all the weed seeds are killed, and then we want to cut our nitrogen levels way down because I don't want to fertilize the weeds.
So that's your biochar. How did you make it?
Burned and burned. There was a lot of autumn olive, a lot of brush that crept into the field, so we just were always piling that. And
So some will be wood ash.
Oh,
Some will be
okay.
ash.
So that's just the
charcoal.
leftovers.
Charcoal.
then all the piles saving all the ash. So that was, you know, you'll get a pile, and I like the ash to build up on it because then it's controlling the oxygen, and so you need that. So much of it, you know, went up in smoke because of the heat.
So
But,
you're more charcoal than necessarily biochar.
yeah, well, what would actually make it what's the difference
I think the
between
biochar is a
the
complete closed chamber, no oxygen. It's just
Pyrolysis.
baked. It's 100% baked. That's a combination of baked and burnt.
But isn't it really the same thing as far as the soil is concerned? You need it's
Yeah,
better than
I
I
think
don't
the
know that you
biochar
got-
is because if you bake it, you get that lattice structure. Burning it, you get ash, and that doesn't have the lattice structure. This is a combination. He's got a combination.
You can see the series.
I've heard of using steam to take out the ash.
Yeah, I was going to try like a trench and stuff, but it all comes down to time. You know, in the winter, there's just not enough. But the as far as compost, tried something the other day. What did it get up to 130 degrees on the? Oh yeah, we got a 140, or what did you say? We need to be 160.
I like to be 160 or 140 for several weeks. ours, we'll start turning our compost now that we're done cultivating fine. We're late this year. We won't spread it till September. We will make sure it gets up there at least. If it's 140 is the maximum we can get because it's too wet this year, but we'll do that for 2 weeks in a row. That'll pretty well sterilize everything that's there.
So this is municipal leaves, and then landscapers drop leaves off anywhere around here. Looks like some needles in there.
Trimmings from bark.
And then the bark is laid down on the bottom, and then the manure gets put in here. And do I need the microphone?
I don't think. Yeah. I think the speakers don't have the speakers.
Oh, well, that's why one speaker is here. So I can stand on the pedal. Anyway, so the municipal leaves coming out of Boyne City, and then mixing it with our manure, and no idea what the exact ratio. But last year I think it worked better because it was drier. This year with all the rains, when I initially built the pile in early June, it was just wallowing in mud up here, even in the sand. But I think there was so much moisture in the leaves that it was hard to get the oxygen, whereas last year being a drier year, and pretty easy to do with just any tractor with forks on. We used a telehandler, a 7-foot fork, come in here, and rather than turning the pile, moving the pile, we're just going in and inverting it and mixing it, and then so getting the oxygen in that way seems to be easier. There's a row on the other side about this size, and then down the other farm there's maybe one of these rows and 2 piles. So ideally you'd turn it every, I don't know, 10 days or 2 weeks, but mine's just a good chance.
We take ours with a payloader and we move the pile about 10 feet every week. 10 feet that way, and the next week we turn around and move it 10 feet back. Now we could do an aeration with the pallet forks. And the other thing I realize that that's not real wood. That's tree trimmings are not the same as sawdust or bark. That's young succulent green stuff when they tree trim. So that's old Joe Soliton type wood that he uses. So you got to remember that wood is alive. It's not old dead bark. And that's another quite a difference out here.
So this is, I saved 1 bucket from last year, but probably made 200 yards. So quite a few spreader loads. And so that was it started out like this, and so it spreads out pretty well. You get some clumps, but what's that? Oh,
It's on.
What a pulpit, huh?
Don't you have a license for that now?
I'm full of it.
Father Dave.
Yeah, so well, you mentioned the wood chips, super high carbon nitrogen ratio. Some people compost that. I'm using that as a layer underneath, as well as you use that in the feed alley in the barn where it's straight manure. Put about 6 inches of wood chips down and soak up all the manure or the urine and nitrates, and then that goes back in the compost pile. Everything gets composted is where we feed, particularly the oats and peas, and they'll sort some of that and get waste that they lay in. In springtime, that's quite anaerobic. You just soak in water, miserable to spread, and put it in the spreader and big logs go over it. So just put it in a compost pile, or just pile it, turn it a couple times, and it breaks down. Real nice spreadable product. But also what I want to show, the windrow from last year was right where you're standing and where those that cover crop is. So the purpose of that, although I had to drive on it, was it's we used to stockpile manure in corners of the fields, just say time haul the dump truck and then spread right there. And if anybody's done that, you'll see next you can't plant anything there. Everything's burnt. You have too much nitrates going down. And well, here's manure with the leaves and the compost. You can see that we don't have that problem because look how green, normal that is right there. So we're not losing, not leaching anything, right? So
that's the other thing with this thing here is the fact that I know what perfect compost is. We do the same thing. Our thing is cut the pile in half, have it in the wall. You can find all kinds of ways to criticize this, but then I said, that's a step in the right direction to stabilize nutrients, to cut down that leaching out there, just like this biochar. Oh, that's not really, but some of that's going to be in the biochar. You know, the guys from Malaysia, they make with palm husk. The number one use we're going to find out of biochar where the investors are putting money is taking tires and making biochar out of tires. You get the most energy out of that, and they take the tires once they get into biochar, they're just kind of falling apart, and they mix it with asphalt, and it increases the highway lasts 3 times longer with biochar tires mixed with asphalt. And you know the reason why you don't see it yet? The asphalt companies are fighting us tooth and nail, and they got a whole lot more money than we do. Profit. Right.
So this is recycled drywall or ground drywall that we used to be able to get, and we had it over at the Daggett Road Farm. And, I think after we'd spend too much, and the guy like said, no more gypsum on there. And so it was still there, so we hauled it back over, and Gary just happened to call the day that I was getting ready to spread it on this field. He said, "Oh, don't put that in compost. It'll tie up nitrates."
We make gypsum mix in a compost pile and rock phosphate. See, we add sulfur and boron, but we don't do that until a month after we started to turn it. But I can put gypsum and rock phosphate, you make ammoniated phosphates, and you make ammonium sulfate. So you got the gypsum with the sulfur in it, will break down, and you get some available calcium. So gypsum and rock phosphate, you need phosphate mixed in the compost pile right when you start. It's not a bad idea if you need those 2 elements. You can buy regular Tennessee brown rock, it'll turn into a carbon complex.
And you kind of see it in the layers here. And so as far as building the piles, the chips went down first, then a double wide bucket of leaves, then manure, more leaves, then probably the gypsum, a little more manure, a little more leaves. Just, I don't know, kind of a guess. Hope for the best.
No, I think you serve your purpose. There's nothing perfect here. I realize
It's
there's a lot of guys spend a lot of money. So I tested our compost 2 years in a row, and the test comes back absolutely perfect. Now I'm going to frame those tests and quit testing. I don't think I can duplicate that.
I did have that tested last year, and I was happy with it. But again, definitely a firm believer in like the layer ash blend. Used to use a lot of turkey litter. It came out of Allendale, and then we could get 3 litter from Theo that's around here from Morgan's. But found with our trucking, we're so far north, it's more beneficial to have the compost trucked up. And here you can tell the difference. Tells the advantages of compost compared to straight litter as far as volatilization of the nitrogen.
Like our chicken manure is coming 4 to 5% nitrogen. Our compost is 1. It's half chicken manure. So we burned off that smell. We got rid of the nitrogen. We're not complaining about that. Our clover cover crop gives us 400 units a hen. This time our clover cover, I don't need more nitrogen. I get all those tested at Ectasis Lab out in South Dakota. Our nitrogen to carbon ratio is unbelievable, and we got excessive amounts of nitrogen. We can see nitrogen carryover the second year on rye. We've been doing this for about 10 years.
I need more
nitrogen builds up really high. And so if you put soluble nutrients out there, you're all right. You're not organic. And some of that's going to leach and get away, and here it's going to be a slower release, more stable. I think you need a balance. A little bit of starter, pop up, put some boost in it, and a little bit of nitrogen in your liquid nitrogen or some carbon base into it. And these light soils, you got to hold it somehow.
Yeah, so the corn, when it's planted, it's got an in-furrow 721-3 molasses product with the carbon. And so it's like the colostrum for the seed. It's right there with the seed, especially on a dry year, just that little bit.
So we were observing yesterday driving around the trees. I mean, where he's been doing his farming, they're much darker green than the trees that are along the
You look back, you'll see the maples where they've got the compost, and then this grove right behind here is quite a bit lighter. There's nothing on there. That's amazing. Then you pick out the ones on the hills where it's a single tree, and that had compost put around there. And so, tell Gary, well, you could look at it that, well, the trees are stealing your nitrogen, but where am I going to get back when the leaves fall down?
The leaves are going to fall, aren't they? They're going to come down, and they're going to have more nitrogen in them. Crazy, isn't it? That's really a struggling way to build soil.
Yeah, they're kind of like shade. That's my silva pasture up there. So all those hills were completely covered with knapweed and autumn olive. We got terrible trouble with invasives, and so they're kind of a crazy project, but I like how it looks now.
How'd you get rid of the knapweed? Sprayed it?
I did do one application of a forefront spray, but with mixture of Boost, the liquid molasses, you stick it on there, feed it in soil. And just to suppress that enough to knock it back, and then mowing it, it definitely helps. But the big thing is fertility. So if we get rid of knapweed, mowing and fertility, and then stick out there. Now it looks kind of brown, but it's green underneath. We walked through it yesterday. There's still good 6-inch good grazing there. And then that'll all get trampled down. It just gets better every year. But it's still got knapweed. There's a little Horiolisum in there. But that's a work in progress. But you'd have seen it 5 years ago. This guy's nuts putting a fence around here. But those that know me, I am nuts.
Good thing your hearing's not real good. You're going to listen to the wrong people.
Some of the, right behind here, you'll see a jump in the oats and the sudex. Well, right there, as you're looking down the row of corn, pretty yellow. There's about 4 plants that have jumped up a foot, dark green. That's right where I grabbed that handful of compost left from last year. So they're feeding off of that. And that hole in the corn, that's where there was a cherry tree stump last year. So basically no nutrients. When the corn jumps up, ways back there 30, 40 feet in, that's where the corn ended last year. So that had the boost. And if you may want to find on the compost pile, you can see where out in there's a section that's tasseling ahead, because that crop was that much taller. It's a little ahead on the tasseling, and that's where that 8-way blend planted in 2021, and then that residual from it in 22 was growing, and then had corn in it. So you can pretty delineated line right there where that cover cut. It really shows you what that.
So you're corn on corn out here. You're using biotechnology, created seeds. Are you using fungicides, insecticides? What are you having to use to grow this crop to keep the bugs and things from eating it up? Health and soil?
Yeah, we don't use anything. It's a conventional corn or a non-GMO 84, 86 day picking corn. So yeah, we don't worry about any of that stuff. Our bugs have four legs and antlers on them. That's
that's most people are scared to take that step, so they go do these things and they keep putting on their dumb bugs and their sprays and they're spending all that money and it doesn't negative out there. You got to earn the right to go there. You got to have enough courage to take the step at a time to get there. That's where you ought to be heading.
I wouldn't know what to put on there anyway. So
that's the one thing about us. We farm organic. I don't know one chemical from the other, and I don't intend to learn.
No, me either.
Last week I was at a field days, and this guy's conventional switching to biological, and he had some soybeans that were just, 90% dead. But he had some edible beans with pursuit and a bunch of cobra and stuff in the tank, and he sprayed those, and then he came home with a little bit of stuff left in the tank and added up his mix for his soybeans and toasted his soybeans. But just what residual was in that tank on a 40-acre field. They were brown and the roots were all rotted off. I don't think you get anything out of it. It was more than just setting them back. It toasted them. But just
whatever this Enlist and all that shit is today, it turns them soybeans. You think the whole damn field's dead and they come out of it, but wow.
I'll be shut down for a week and a half.
I guess spraying for bugs, used to have alfalfa weevil, and that's what you spray in Boost, which is the fuel up product, liquid molasses. And what's that doing? It's a healthier plant with a complete protein that the bugs aren't able to digest. Is it protein or the sugars?
It's the sugars, I think.
The sugar. Normally I would spray about 4 gallons an acre Boost on the alfalfa foul and first cutting, but didn't get too much this year. Foliar, yeah. And you definitely see the response from that. And maybe not, and we can look at some of the alfalfa over there, that 10-year-old seeding, it's pretty much had it every year. But it's, it's kind of a cumulative effect with that boost. So many of the fertilizers, you're looking at 1 year and done, or whatever, in side-by-side comparisons, whereas when I first tried that boost, probably almost 15 years ago, we sprayed a test plot of it, and on the Daggett Road where you could see it from the road, and 2 and 3 years later, I could still tell where I sprayed that with six cuttings, and what's boost, 4% nitrogen?
403.
It's a 403. Yep. So that wasn't the nitrogen we're seeing. That nitrogen was long gone, right? And the other thing, you could tell walking through it, even at night, you could tell where it was just harder to walk through it. It was that thick. So it's the benefit from it apparently isn't the nitrogen or whatever. It's got to be affecting that biology.
Yeah, you're feeding biology.
And the other thing, we were out in the field yesterday, and of course there's all kinds of white on the leaf, and of course that's calcium and boron. There's quite a movement going on, started in Pennsylvania, where guys made mistakes and ended up putting on, instead of 10 pounds of sodium borate, 10 pounds of actual boron. Now, 90% of the soil samples that come through our lab are deficient in 2 major minerals, sulfur and boron. The atmosphere doesn't have the sulfur. The sulfur affects the health of the plant, makes complete proteins, and boron is sugar translocation. There's some other things it does about the health of the plant. I got some fields we now put the boron in the compost. We got 6 pounds of boron per acre, actual boron, 60 pounds of sodium borate per acre. I think guys are seeing a tremendous response on this boron. They say if you grow sweet corn and you get earworms in your sweet corn, I was just talking some research about that, raise your boron level up. The boron in that husk gets high enough, the insects you'll not have earworms. Now you guys need to try that out. He sprayed on a calcium boron product. I never saw that before. Did you get that from you? Calcium and boron?
Yeah.
The Calbor product that is left from many years ago, and the calcium settled in the bottom the way we wanted it. But
you
put a drill down in there
it.
and get it back in solution. It was cheap. So.
I think it's a wonderful product. Now you're going to be forced to get more in.
No, well, I need the calcium. I need the boron. Used to use what is it, borax or something on that output. But again, what I'm after is just cheap feed. This is being harvested as year corn to
BioCal
feed
would
these
bring boron
guys.
and calcium with it.
Yes, I would.
Sure would. BioCal, get calcium and boron with it.
Yeah, well, I love the BioCal, but I don't love the trucking price from Iowa.
Yeah,
so when you guys get that,
We're working on it.
working on it, yes,
We've been
we are.
subsidizing the trucking with the idea of getting enough business up here that we'll start manufacturing it in Michigan or Ohio somewhere.
yeah, no, that's a tremendous response on the alfalfa. The biggest thing there is the leaf retention.
Yeah.
You know, it'll make a difference in selling hay. Sell hay with leaves on it. So.
Lime is insoluble, gypsum's a little bit more soluble, and BioCal is burnt hydrated lime. If you watch your CBS News in the morning on Saturday mornings, like I sometimes do, about 2 weeks ago, they had a story of putting on cement dust on fields to sequester carbon from the atmosphere. And they said, it's never been done before. We've been doing it for 40 years. That's the University of Illinois. They said, see, when you burn the lime, you're burning out the carbon. And then when you put it back in the soil, you're actually attracting carbon into your soil. And carbon has a lot to do with those guys in California using carboxyl acid, and along with a machine that pulls carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, injecting in their soils, unbelievable changes in their pictures of their soils by injecting carbon into their soils from a machine and carboxyl acid instead of using sulfur and burning up your soil with the sulfur. So BioCal, the burnt hydrated lime, actually brings carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere into your ground.
So it's carbon dioxide that you're after.
We're after everybody says, oh, the soil breathes and carbon dioxide boils off. These little bugs are aerobic and they give off carbon dioxide. But carbon in the soil, there's a complex thing going on to making that into a stable carbon with the bugs in the soil by putting more carbon dioxide down in there.
It's like if you just cultivated corn, why does that corn jump
Like carbon
a foot
flush.
that next
Yeah, you get the carbon to boil off and get on the bottom of the leaves. And
bottom of the leaves that's taking it in?
Basically, so all decaying matter gives off carbon, but all growing matter needs it, or what?
that's correct. The thing that's wrong, like with guys nitrogen and anhydrous in the fall, they're boiling off carbon with no plant to catch it. And in the summertime, if you go out in the middle of that field, there's no carbon. You get a carbon dioxide meter, it reads 0. And that's why they need to actually quit. They got to put the nitrogen. That's why anybody's getting high yields. What are they all doing? Making at least 7 trips over the field to match us organic guys in travel. They're side dressing nitrogen. They're putting on fungicides, and they're splitting that nitrogen 3-4 times. High boys, putting some boost with it, putting something with it to stabilize it. So you dump it all in the fall, you lose all your carbon dioxide. And then that's your major limiting factor on your yields is carbon dioxide. You don't realize that, but that's carbon dioxide to make that crop grow. You just can't let it go off at the wrong time.
And then when you got water standing everywhere like we do this year, that shuts your carbon dioxide right
It
down.
shuts a lot of things down. So we brew up some bugs I get from Ohio. That's one's a nitrogen producing bacteria, the other's a phosphorus releasing. Phosphorus I think is really huge in growing a bumper crop and being able to grow more of your own nitrogen. At field days we had last month, he buys 20 units of N per acre, 200 some bushel corn. Now he's got dairy manure and he's got cover crops. He's only buying 20 more units of N. His energy, nitrogen purchase efficiency is unbelievable, but he's got manure and he's got cover crops.
Mention one more thing while we're back here. You can wander in there, anybody wants to see it, but used to do more with interseeding rye and corn, planting it first week of July, and that's worked out pretty well. And so I just did a little test spot here, but Frank just planted maybe 20 acres yesterday or 2 days ago, or more than that, 40 acres or so. And how many acres are?
You planted clover and rye in the corn?
Just rye.
Okay.
Just rye, yeah.
Rye grass.
And then when the cattle come back out of the UP, you're going to combine that or chop that? You'll chop that, so when that gets chopped off, that rye is going to be grow. And then when the cattle come back out of the UP, they've got annual rye. You planted, you were planting rye New Year's Day, I think, this year.
That was cereal rye. What you planted in your cornfield was annual rye grass.
Nope, just cereal rye.
You need cereal rye in your corn right now, too.
Yeah. Great.
I've always done rye grass in the summertime in the corn, did a shakeout, and then cereal rye in the fall after the corn was harvested.
We got to buy rye grass. Got to pay money for that one. Cereal rye, go to the combine.
Yeah, I got bins
$7 a
for
bushel. And you got $15 an acre tops.
We grow 25,000 bushel of rye. I got rye coming up both years.
You gotta drop your price, Gary. Give it away like everybody else.
But it's organic.
Yeah, I know it's
We know we're going to pay for it. We sell it and don't tell anybody it's organic. If they think it's organic, there must be something wrong with it. We don't tell them. They don't know. It grows for crying out loud.
Anyways, if you see I'll go in there and pull out some of that rye.
So now, interseeded like you did, I've not had a lot of success. When we were on 38-inch rows, we had more success. Now, see, conventional farmers got a better chance to interseed their corn than organic farmers. We got done cultivating last week. It's a little late to plant your cover crop when the corn is this big already. But if you plant your corn the end of April in our world, and about the middle of May, when the corn's that big, you take a Pennsylvania, they got their Penn State's got their drill kind of thing that drills it in between the rows. Man, I've seen success with that. But see, then it gets a chance to grow before it gets shaded out. And they're planting the first part of May. You can still grow. You can plant alfalfa and clover the first part of May, but planting it in July is really gutsy. It's hot and dry and nothing's going to grow. Rye is a tough old beast. That'll probably grow. But
it works great. Let's show you some of the rye there, because when it was going to make, you hear people say, oh, they're worried it's going to rob their yield. Well, look at what the corn is, and here's this sickliest looking plant you ever saw, this rye. There's no way that rye is competing with that corn. But September, and the leaves start drooping and drying up and getting rain and sun in there, and by the time taking that corn off, it's 6-8 inches of lush rye in there. So good enough for the money, but and a lot of roots too.